everyone, and welcome to what is a wee bonus podcast at the end of the year, where I'm going to talk to this gentleman on my left. If you're watching on Zoom, Andy Braidwood, how you doing?
Hi, Ali. I'm very well. I'm in my workshop tonight because it's the only quiet place I can find where I'm not getting moved around and so forth. So yeah, it's nice and peaceful in here.
It is. It sounds peaceful, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
It's good to see you. And the reason we're doing this is because earlier in the summer, when we were all stuck down for the first time, lockdown, I should say, for the first time, you and I did our look back at some kind of musical memories from the 80s onwards to the present day. And we thought that we would reconvene once more to do our year in culture, if you like, and the things that we've really enjoyed and have kind of kept us sane during this mad year. First of all, how are things with you?
Things are actually okay. You know, you're quite right. It's been obviously, everyone's had a strange year and lots of things that have kept me. I've found myself going back to stuff and rereading stuff and re-listening, like almost like a comfort blanket, just to reassure yourself that, it's all going to be all right, sort of thing.
I think that's interesting. We might talk about that later with some of the reissues, album reissues of the year. I think there's been that idea of comfort nostalgia, no doubt about it, about going back and revisiting things that have meant a lot to us in the past, almost as a kind of time travel, get out of the place you're in and take you back to a kind of warmer and more comforting place.
Absolutely.
Well, let's crack on with our, what we're going to do is have 10 choices each of our, to talk about. I'll be interested to see what they are. So let's crack on. Andy, what's your first choice of one of your highlights of the year?
Okay, was it something it was just at the start of lockdown? Well, just quite fresh into lockdown, Brian Sweeney had decided to, or Friar Brian Sweeney had decided to, his photography, for those of you that don't know, he's a photographer based in Glasgow, yes?
Yeah.
And, the work dries up as soon as you're all locked down and all that for everyone, and especially creative industries, but pretty much everyone. The work just gets switched off like a tap. So he decided to embark on his lockdown portraits and going around by himself, socially distancing from everyone, of course, and taking pictures of people in their windows and in their door frames.
Yes, bad one.
You look very learned in that one.
Well, that's me hanging out my window. This is what he did, wasn't it? It was
people. Yeah, well, I've got mine here, as if by magic.
Excellent.
That's our one, which I really love. And I mean, you'd go a long way to get a better family document than that.
Oh, absolutely. He's a tremendous photographer.
Absolutely. Well, I've been following everything he does, and really, there's a recent portfolio of songbirds, I think, and it was absolutely stunning. Absolutely stunning work. But these things, as a document, to look back on this in 20 years' time, or if we're lucky enough to do all that, what a document to have of that particular time. And I've gone through them all. You can get them on. You can view them on Last Night for Glasgow's page somewhere, can't you? Or you can at least get the link from Last Night from Glasgow, and you can see all of them. It's just a fabulous project.
And as you say, he went everywhere. He went all around the country to photograph people. And you mentioned Last Night from Glasgow. This came off the back of the first thing that I want to talk about, which is their album, The Isolation Sessions, which I have mentioned elsewhere. But I think, if I'm right, I am right, it has got some other examples in the sleeve. Yeah, fantastic. Some of them on that, but there's many more. So if you can view all of them, it'd be great. But this album, which kind of sparked the idea in Brian that he was going to go and take pictures of people in situ, came out March. The idea was early March, and then they did it over March and April, all done, during lockdown. And the very kind of simple but genius. Often the best ideas are simple, and it was that bands and musicians who are signed to Last Night from Glasgow would cover tracks from other bands and musicians who are signed to Last Night from Glasgow. So you've got Cloth doing Annie Booth, you get Lola and Slacks doing Broken Chanter, you've got Biz doing, I've forgotten their name now. And you have, Slime City, sorry, complete, and vice versa, by the way, Slime City covering Biz. And well, you can go and find out for yourselves. If you go to Last Night from Glasgow, this was to raise money for the artists and, well, for venues, really, venues and record stores affected by the first lockdown. 23 artists recorded each other's songs for the unique snapshot of unprecedented times. It's, I mean, alongside the photographs, Sweeney's photographs, this is almost one of the definitive releases of this year. And again, people will look back on it and just see why it was released and the effect that it had as well. Because I think it was that perfect thing which has run throughout the year of music being made, having to be made by the people who do make it, and also giving succor to the people who listen to it. So Last Night from Glasgow, you know, they were involving their members and the musicians, and they've always been that kind of gang feel about them, you know, that you belong. And I think that just strengthened it completely. It was a great thing to do.
Yes, it was. Even I'm sure the photography project just seemed to bring everyone together. You know, you're part of this support network almost for creative things happening, and it's nice to be involved anyway.
Yeah. And they have to say throughout the year they were doing things. They managed to put pretty much the only gig in town on in the summer before everything worsened again. SWG3, and are already planning kind of online stuff going forward. And you know, more power to them. More power to them. Okay, Andy, your next choice.
Right. Well, running on from things vinyl, I got a record player for the first time. Actually, it's the only record player I've ever bought, because I always used yours or Dad's. So last year or the year before, but then really got the bug during lockdown, probably because you had time to surf the internet, and then got the 12-inch remix bug. They tend to be from about 85 to 89, that kind of thing. I've not from my choice, but it's just what I've noticed. So obviously, you know, I started off with my beloved Big Country and started getting all the, you know, trying to hunt down the Canadian version and you know, and all that, because you get an extra song or it's mixed ever so slightly differently or mastered, and it got a bit silly. Also, one of my other super favorite bands from the 80s is All About Eve, and I went a bit mad and got like lots of ones with free posters, and this one, Road to Your Soul, it's a cracking good tune, Ali, but it's not even been opened. So you know, that's how mental it got at that point. So, and I know you at the time you were buying 80s remixes, and what I liked about the 80s remixes is it was in the days before Logic and that, you know, the software, the DAW software, and so you couldn't cut and paste it. Well, you had to physically cut and paste, you know, or you would physically cut bits out and glue them, tape them back together. And so the remixes are so fresh to hear songs that you know very well, just spread out and let run, and outros let run for another 2 minutes, etc. So I've been having a whale of a time with all that, and it's incredibly self-indulgent, and my family hate me.
Well, what I would say about that, Andy, because you got me quite a few 12-inch examples for my birthday, and some of them are great, but some of them aren't so great. You know, there are ones where... Well, no, I'm not saying those ones in particular. I mean, 12-inch reminded me that there was that boost in the 80s in particular, the early to mid 80s, you know. It was, for many record companies, it was another way to fleece your music fan, you know. Classic example was Zang Tum Tum, particularly with Frankie Goes to Hollywood, where like every week there'd be another 12-inch release.
Yes.
And sometimes with, like, I had one which had an interview with the three, you know, the guys who basically couldn't play, Ped, Mark, and I forget the other guy, you know, who were just like, oh, it was at Christmas time as well. So
the notorious Christmas interview.
Yeah. My name's Peds and I wear kicks and me look as though I earn a packet. You know, apologies for my Scots accent there. Yeah. But I can still remember it. But looking back, and it reminded me that it was another way, and record companies always find a way to do this, is, Crisp Keith, new beer. Always find a way to kind of squeeze the record fan even more, and they do it, you know, to this day. Not every label, I should say, but usually the big labels. And I think with the 12-inch phenomenon, for instance, I love the Hipsway 12-inch with the remixes of that. It really changes the song, and there's loads that I love. But some of them, you've just done this to basically get people buying, you know, to keep your single at the top of the charts.
6 versions of It's Tricky by Run DMC.
Yeah.
Actually quite good. But I know what you're saying. It's like, who needs six versions of it? But
some of them are great, some of them are really good, but listening to them all through, you think, oh, this is a bit much.
Things like these are really like, they're kind
What's
of
that for people who are listening?
Like 10-inch versions with your extra picks and all that kind of gear. I love
all that kind of stuff. I absolutely love it. Yeah. And you know, that's who they're for. But you know, a good example, I suppose, would be the fact that you'll have all the color editions of The Crossing.
Red, gold, and blue. Yeah, sorry, red, green, and blue. Yes, of course.
Yeah, and I know there are different tracks on some of them, but you know, you do think.
Oh, those are all the same. They're
all the same. They are all the same. Yeah. So,
but particularly Big Country got caught with that because they did bring in a rule, because the record companies were producing gatefold version, free poster version, So they brought in a rule that you weren't selling the same record over and over and over in different boxes. Yeah. And Big Country got stung with that by a record. I think it was called Fragile Thing. And it was all to do with the way that the product creations of folding out CD jewel boxes or something. It was, anyway, it all kicked off a Big Country camp. That's all I'm saying.
And anything else you want to say about your 80s 12-inch mixes, or are you happy for me to?
No, you prattle on, Ali. No, I'm fine.
Since you are having a beer, let's take a break. I want you to make the choice for me about what I'm going to have as my beer of the evening to see what they're like. Because I've got Crunch Peanut Butter Milk Stout, or I've got just something that's simply called Siren Calypso, which is a dry hopped sour.
I want you to have the peanutty one.
Yeah, I thought you might. Let's have a go.
Crunchy.
I hope not. Anyway.
It doesn't sound very... I tell you, I had a really stinky beer the other day.
Oh, it's properly peanutty, Andy.
I had one in my advent calendar, and it was a salted caramel shortbread, Millionaire shortbread flavoured stout.
Right.
I couldn't drink it, guys. You know.
I have to say, one of the things, just as a little aside, that I have developed during this year is trying all the different types of beer and doing my little beer reviews on Instagram. It's research.
Absolutely valid research. And now I have a friend who is going to be Braemar Brewing Company.co.uk. It's completely, even at breakfast, right, kids?
Yeah, it's beer.
No, we have to taste it, see it's right before it goes in the kegs.
Yeah, kegs, right enough.
Kegs, old man's kegs.
So I'm going to go back to the start of the year before we were locked down to remember the Glasgow Film Festival, which suddenly seems much more important than ever. They're going to do it next year, but I think it's all going to be online. In fact, I know it is because I've put in the press pass for it. I actually, before I say that, I'd forgotten about Celtic Connections. It's kind of gone straight out of my head because of everything. But Glasgow Film Festival, one, it had Peter Mackie-Byrne's second feature was at it, which was great to see Peter's latest film. And it's a gorgeous film. It's called Rialto, set in Dublin. And we talked about nearly everything I'm about to speak on our Best Films of 2020 podcast, which you can check out. They also showed the film version of The Sopranos, Alan Warner's Sopranos, not the television program, which was about, I think it's called Our Ladies. But it's about the band, the choir who are from Oban, all girls choir, who go and wreak havoc in Edinburgh, and they've got to get back to the pub, the Mantrap bar or club in Oban to complete the night. It's a gorgeous film. It's not had a release yet for obvious reasons, so when it does, I would certainly check that out. But the Glasgow Film Festival, I love it as a festival. It's so well curated, so well run, so accessible. I did a podcast with the two of the people who organised it, and it was just so interesting to get their insight into not just this festival, but previous ones they worked on. And I cannot wait to. The last film I saw, I think, was Flint, which was Anthony Baxter's film about the water problems in Flint, Michigan, terrible problems which are still being felt today. But it was in a packed GFT. So you were literally cheek by jowl with everyone, and folk were sitting even on the steps. It was so busy because there was a Q&A afterwards.
The very thought.
The very thought, I know. But it was fabulous. And I cannot wait for the days where we can do that again, because I don't feel comfortable enough at the moment. But the days of going to a packed, small, independent cinema and festival and just enjoying what's on offer, I think it's going to seem more special than ever. If we ever took it for granted, I don't think we will again anytime soon. I hope not. Okay, Andy, what's your next choice?
Right, I have down here, and I know I'm hoping you'll know quite a lot about this as well, because it's new to me, and believe it or not, one of the things to do with this year is I've been going back and listening to the music that I feel happened, and it just passed me by. For the podcast listeners, Ali's made a curious face while sniffing his peanut beer there.
I'm not convinced at all.
No,
I'll give it a review in a bit, but on you go.
Okay, that's that sponsorship deal blowing out the window, man. Right. So yes, records that I'd missed while growing up, and I think and people talk about all the time. So I went back and listened to a lot of Bowie, because I know you quite like Bowie growing up, but I missed the I don't know what was doing, listening to Adam Ant probably, or something, you know what I mean, something more age appropriate.
I think the problem was in the 80s, he wasn't going through his best time. And even in the 90s, he wasn't particularly going through his best time musically. I think he would say that. I mean, I did love Let's Dance. I think it's a cracking album with the production.
Even the Chet albums were good. Do you know what I mean? So yeah.
And there's always something of interest with Bowie. I love Blue Jean and all the kind of, even his so-called failures were very interesting. Tonight he's got Gilbert and George doing the album cover.
Yes.
There's always of interest. However, I can understand maybe why you didn't particularly want to get into this. Who would have looked like an old guy basically at that time?
I suppose. But I went back and listened to a whole bunch of that. Most of it actually I went back to the first record, second record, and the Dancing Gnome and all that kind of stuff, which I actually quite like. Right up to the sort of mid 80s is where I kind of stopped, because I kind of caught myself, you know what I mean. The other one was Kraftwerk. I went back because I'd missed Kraftwerk, apart from Mr. Gavin Templeton and Norrie Mortimer giving you a cassette back in the day. God bless.
Very much great cassette from the great Norrie.
Yeah, with Autobahn on it. So Autobahn was my only reference point to Kraftwerk. So I bought almost all their sort of main albums, and gosh, what else did I do? Oh, the other one I found was Misplaced Childhood. That's the main one, because that fits into kind of how I was feeling during all this lockdown. I thought,
that's Marillion.
Yes, of course, Marillion. And I don't know how I'd missed that, Ali, because it was a huge single. Kayleigh was a huge single.
I think because I had the first two albums and was a bit of a fan of Marillion earlier on, when it was all dark and weird and proggy. I even had the 12-inch of Market Square Heroes live, and then I think they maybe lost a few fans when it became just a bit poppy, I guess. Maybe not. It's not really poppy. Kayleigh's an amazing song, but I think I was quite young and easily swayed. So I think
Sure.
like, oh, they're on Top of the Pops, are they? Then I'm not gonna, that stupid kind of thing that you would do.
Well, it probably was that, because you had the other, like It Bites and people like that were doing kind of pop prog, I suppose.
Yeah.
Anyway, all that aside, and that's probably why I didn't get into it, because I thought at the time it probably wasn't for me. But I got a copy of Misplaced Childhood, and oh man, I just listened to it for days on end, on my headphones during my dog walk. And I thought, I'm glad I didn't find this when I was younger, because I think it would have affected me too much.
I think it's almost the perfect age, because this was, most of it would have been written, not all of it, but most of it would have been written by Fish, Derek Dick himself.
Yes, yeah.
And he would have been getting older and looking back on that childhood. And that's really, I think, when it's a really affecting album.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And anyway, kids, bang out this week, right up to date with the Misplaced Childhood. But it's a cracking record if you missed it. And I will champion the mid-80s prog rock any day.
Well, we will bring it kicking and screaming up to date, because I want to talk about a couple of bands who released things this year who you've had up playing at the gallery, because as regular listeners will know, Andy puts on gigs at his gallery. And there was a few folk that had releases this year, if I can just find some of them. Starting with our mutual friend, Warren McIntyre and Starry Skies, Do It With Love, which is a phenomenal album of just kind of classic, mature pop music. I think I maybe called it timeless at the time, and I think that's true. It's a great, I've got a collection of songs. Have you listened to it much?
I have, yes, because Warren sent me up a sort of, a download of it, and I had to listen to it before it came out, and yeah, it was great, and I got to hear bits of it as it was being done, which was quite nice. So yeah, I have. Like you say, it sounds incredibly mature. I don't mean that as in like an old, just an older head and an older shoulder. No,
it's reflective. I mean, talking about Misplaced Childhood, it's reflective as well. It's keeping positive, but it's got some, melancholy there as well. It's a great band. Starry Skies are always a great band. It's fantastically made and produced and engineered. And
I think one of the things, sorry, Ali, I think one of the things was from speaking to Warren, he wanted to write love songs, but these love songs were applicable to, you could sing them to your dog, or you could sing them to your son, or you could sing to your granny. You can actually read those love songs as anyone that ever meant anything to you. He's very good at packaging that up into a song, those feelings.
Very good at that.
And I think that's what he's done very well on that.
Yeah, and I know they did a live launch recently online, but I was thinking of all the bands. Well, no, I'm not going to say of all the bands, but so many bands, and you might have had up at the gallery who couldn't play live this year. It's a shame, because I actually saw some of these songs being played again just before we locked down in the Doublet Bar in Glasgow, where Murray Easton put on a gig with Warren. And he's someone who just loves playing live and just loves playing the music and having the musicians around him as well. It's almost the reason that he does it. So I'm hoping in the new year that he'll be able to kind of show these songs off to their full glory.
Warren always says he surrounds himself with very, very good musicians, and he's very good himself, but he doesn't like to blow his own trumpet, but he does have good musicians too.
Another couple of people who released material this year that you had up at the gallery are Mark W. Johnson. And he came up and he played. In fact, he introduced us basically to Barry James. That's Barry's album, Psychedelic Soup, which is a brilliant record.
It is.
And again, I just feeling for these artists that you just want. I saw Barry played either at the end of last year, at the beginning of this year, in the 13th note, just him and his guitar. In the small basement room there. It was just magical. He's one of these people that music just seems to come out of his pores.
And two nicer people you couldn't meet, they're just absolutely, they're really lovely men as well. Do you know what I mean? They're just really lovely guys. So, but yes, Barry just seems to everything. It's one of those people, the music is better for him being in the room, if that's not being so,
Yeah.
He just seems to make everything fit together better,
And I think Mark's got a release coming out on New Year's Eve. I think that's right.
Right.
Which I hope it does. But yeah, I guess I wanted to look at the people that we missed this year, not being able to see them. There's far too many to talk about here. But I thought we could, at least mention a few of them that had played up in the gallery, and hopefully it won't be too long before we can do those kind of things again, including, I think, the next person you're going to talk about.
Yes, indeed. Well, that's right, because we're keeping all the dialogue going with the acts and also some of their managers and so forth. And so we're missing not having Jenny Sturgeon at the gallery this year. We had planned, hey, snap, we're both holding up pictures for the listeners of the album. We already had this booked up to come and play over at we were going to do it in the Village Hall alley, because I think the room here is too small, and I think the take up for this would be big, because it's based on Nan Shepherd's Living Mountain book, and Jenny's written this whole album based as a response to not only reading that. I'm telling you this, because you've done a podcast on it. So listeners can scroll down and listen to Ali's podcast and interview with Jenny if they need to. But this is a response to her not only reading the book, but having a love for the Cairngorm Hills, where she was lucky enough to grow up near, and her dad would take her out walking and so forth. So it's a reflection on all of that. And I'm lucky enough to live in the area. And I wouldn't have it any other way. It's a beautiful area, and this record kind of is like a soundtrack to, if it's like a soundtrack to the Cairngorms. It's absolutely stunning, and
it is absolutely stunning, and it's also called The Living Mountain. And it's she did a series of whole stuff. In fact, Jenny really kind of embraced the restrictions, if you like. Thought, well, what could I do? So she did a whole series of podcasts, which are really worthwhile checking out. Talking to the people that she collaborated with for the album. The album itself is just a stunning piece of work. As you say, it's like a soundtrack to, I'd love to, and eventually we will, is stick it on my phone and wander around the hills and just have this soundtrack going on, because you do get the running of the water and the bird song, all of that kind of stuff is involved in it. And that, people have been doing that, of course, over a long period of time. But now, maybe with the fact that the recording equipment is so good and strong, you get incredible results.
Well, she had a couple of field recording people, Jez Riley French, who comes up to Cairngorms quite a lot to do a thing called Murmuration. They base it at Glen Shee, and Chris Watson came up as well for that, and I'd meant to go, but it didn't work out. Anyway, they come up and record and go on field trips and make recordings, so they're like the top of the game, these guys. And so to weave those field recordings into the album seemed to make complete sense. I don't know why more people do. I suppose more people are doing it now, because, like you say, it's easy to go out with a handheld recording device and do it, but to weave that into the album is quite powerful. She also worked with my friend Rory Dowling, who owns Taran Guitars, and Jenny had said very briefly, because you've covered this already in your other podcast, Ali, but I'd like to borrow a nice guitar to make this album, because she had a guitar and it was a nice guitar, but it was, it wasn't a super duper guitar. And so she asked Rory, and Rory said, I'll make you one, and let's make it specific to the area and try and get woods from the area. So he sent me an email saying, do you know anyone that'd have a lump of wood that's maybe a couple of 100 years old, or an old post in their house, or an old barn or something? And so we're having a scratch around, and I Facebooked all the people that I thought might have something, and our friend Tom up at Tor, who were doing the Fife Arms renovation, they had the old shelving out of the wine storage from the old hotel, which was all Scots pine, which I would imagine came locally
Yeah.
and had been shelves for over 100 years in the hotel, and still had all the markings from the bottles and stuff. So he turned that into the guitar. So that's the guitar that went into being on this album. Yeah. So super. Yeah,
it's a great story, that, because I think it's an album full of details, full of little details, and that kind of little details works a treat. Little mid-podcast review. That's Bowfin, by the way. Peanut butter milk stout. Not for me, thanks. So I'm going to have to switch beers at some point.
Oh, really, Ali? Not bad?
It has to be bad for that to happen.
I've seen you soldier on through worse.
Exactly. The smell. So I'd like to talk about, there's loads of people were doing online gigs and trying how, find ways of kind of getting their music there. Particularly, I think when the first lockdown started, it was like, oh, how are we going to do this? And there was a, great rush of them. And some people did them better than others. And I'm not going to mention loads either way, but I just want to talk about one who seemed to do it absolutely spot on, and who both of us have been regular attendees at, and it's Zoe Bestel and her Wednesday night online gigs, where she managed to create this kind of group of people, almost who would come back and say, hello, how are you doing? It almost became a little community thing in itself.
Yeah.
And she was, you could win some prizes, and she had, just very natural charm talking between the songs. The way that she sings, anyway, we've spoken about this before, very quiet. It almost draws you in to listen. And they were the kind of highlights of my week, I have to say.
Yes, I tuned in for most of those when I could, and very much so. You feel quite it's a great thing to be able to do that. Sorry, what am I trying to say? It's a privilege, really, to be able to these incredibly intimate one microphone gig, and sorry, Ali, I don't know where I was going with that, but
it was very intimate, and it was lovely to kind of think, you used to get a little alert 1 hour before. I would think, if you didn't have anything on, which most of us didn't, let's face it, you're like, oh great, I can go and catch up with all the folk who are watching Zoe's gig. And it was, a few of them, we knew anyway, but no, they were great nights. And I think there are certain things that will continue once things, if they ever do get back to what we call normal. And I certainly think some of those kind of online events will continue.
I think that's right. The ingenuity that people have had to, out of this set of circumstances, people have had to find a way of doing it. Some of them, you think, actually, this is a much better way of doing it. This is getting out to so many people, and we're not having to lug amps into, although that's good. Obviously you can't replace live music, but there is definitely a room for these intimate sort of person bringing the songs out, maybe even before you see what people get some feedback, how do you these songs aren't finished yet, what do you think, sort of thing, all that.
Absolutely. And really respecting people's feedback from it. Okay, Andy, the next from you, I believe, is another look at an anniversary thing.
Oh, it's an anniversary one, because why look forward when you can look back? This is my original copy. This is now 25 years old, which makes me feel oddly ancient, Ali, because I got this when I was a student, and this was one of my religious books almost, And
what is it for people who are
sorry, for people that are listening, it is A Year with Swollen Appendices by Brian Eno. It's Brian Eno's diary. He was approached by Faber and Faber to produce a book, and he kept starting a book and thinking, I really have to, because he had the contract and so forth. So started a diary, and like most people, he said, we started diaries, and I know a lot about the Januaries in my life, but this was the first diary he kept right all the way through, and it's fantastic to read from a 25-year perspective, because he's talking about CD-ROMs, and the internet is in its infancy. Things that are obviously covers ambient music, but things like axis thinking. There's a lecture on axis thinking, which is where, you know, you've got your X and Y and your things happen along the thing. These are things I hadn't thought about. You know, I was very much right or wrong, black or white, you know, that kind of thing. But these kind of ways of thinking that he was examining, role-playing games and interactive CD-ROMs were the things. But to see where we are now in a short period of time, it's freaky, but it's really worth reading. It's a great book, very easy to read.
I think that's based on Aristotle's rule of the mean, that got X and Y. So there you go.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah.
Anyway, I think it's a really interesting book, because I remember reading it at the time based on your recommendation, and it felt like reading about the future. You know, Brian Eno's always had this little bit of, you know, urbane spaceman to him, you know, that it was kind of slightly otherworldly. And now I can imagine reading it again and going, that seems, because nothing ages so quickly, I think, as technology.
Mm-hmm.
And him talking about those things, you go, what, CD-ROM? What, mini disc? What?
Yeah, and also he starts to talk about generative music, which is, or generative music, I think it is, not generative music. Anyway, generative, potato, where he was explaining that it might seem alien in the future to listen to something repetitively. You know, you might set up the sounds, let them run with certain rules, and they would weave themselves into this piece of music, which would never be the same twice, you know, which isn't, again, isn't a new idea. It's not even particularly his idea, but now these things are commonplace in the background of computer games and things like that. Things are set to run and run and run, you know, as long as you play the game, the music keeps crescendoing and fading out, fading in, and all. So there's rules applying to what's happening. I'm a huge fan, so it's, and I love reading diaries as well, because I think for me, I'm unlike you, Ali, I'm not a huge reader, so that's diaries are good for me to read.
Okay, so the next one for me is something that we've spoken about when we were doing the roundups of our favourite music, and it is getting interested again in Scottish hip hop.
Yeah, man.
So I know it's something that you've also kind of re-engaged with, or just engaged with this year.
I found it this year, literally, as a type of music had escaped me entirely, you know.
Well, I listened to things like Loki and Solar Eye and Hector Berserk, and, you know, just as a kind of the ones that had kind of broken through a little bit, or had some traction, and I'd been to a few gigs and all of that kind of stuff. And I think last year it might have been, or was it the year before, Steg G won Best Hip Hop at the Scottish Alternative Music Awards. So I thought, well, I better look into his stuff. And you're almost like the kind of gatekeeper or grandfather or godfather of Scottish hip hop.
He seems to be the key into the whole thing, really. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you check out his Spotify playlist, which is exhaustive, it's great if you want to find out more about because it was the newer guys. It was Vagrant Real Estate, and it was Ward Jenkins, and it was Cryptic and Empress, and far too many to mention that you're thinking, this is great stuff. And you made the point, and I've stolen it and made it elsewhere, is they were rapping or singing about things that were easily, you know, it wasn't like West LA or something like that. It was, you know, West Kilbride or...
it wasn't Bitches, 40s and Blunts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it was about East Kilbride or you know,
wherever they were from. It was just absolutely relatable is the word I was looking for. And great stuff, really talented stuff. I would love to play more of it on the radio, but they swear, man.
Well, they do. They have a, I don't know if they kiss their mother with that mouth, but they have a, all right?
Absolutely. And in fact, some people I've gone, look, can I play this track? Is there swearing on it? And they go, oh no, there's no swearing on it. And then you listen and you go, yes, there is. It's in a sample. It's not you, but it's still swearing. Yeah. And which never mind. But it's all, you know, it's great. It's very interesting. It's very creative. It's very exciting. And I'm looking forward to getting into more of it in 2021.
Really incredible writing for me, you know, because the wordplay and but in the Scots, it's not really Scots dialect, but you know, in the Scottish
Yeah.
Scottish slang and even as local as Edinburgh. You know, some of the words that are used compared to Edinburgh to Glasgow. It's fantastic. I really enjoy it. Loki, when you're talking about Loki, his latest video was incredibly powerful. Had me quite moved with it. You know, the one about male suicide, etc. That's worth checking out. And he made that himself because he thought, you know, you're not going to get funding for this video, you know, because it's too heavy. But yeah, it's great.
That's the thing. I think it's one of the most inventive, you know, types of music that's happening in Scotland today, and I think still not enough people know about it, and I include myself in that. I still don't know enough about it, but it was great to kind of start to.
It's exciting. It's nice to feel excited about music again. You know,
absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, Andy, next one from you.
Oh, right. Sound mapping.
Yes, I'm interested to hear about.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about sound mapping. I'm hoping to start a sound mapping habit this year, and by doing that, you can sort of geolocate the sounds. You know, instead of on Google Maps pinning your photograph, you pin your little sound file, and people have been doing it for years now. I just wasn't up to speed with it, but it was through a man called Pete Stollery, who works at the Aberdeen University and teaches the sort of contemporary music degree up there. It's so much fun to go on. There's various different websites and apps that you can I think you can actually just go through Google Maps, but you can come through different sound maps and just click anywhere in the world and listen to a field recording of, you know, by a railway down in, you know, Texas or something, or you get the idea, of Buddhist temple somewhere. It doesn't have to be just a field, you know, Laurenskirk or something, you know. So this has been one of my things that I've been doing, and I think, oh, I want to go from consuming it to actually adding into it. So hopefully this year I'm going to go around with my my field recorder and start trying to get into the habit of making a recording. It'd be too much to do a day, but maybe one a week, and pin those onto a geolocation type software program.
The equivalent of, instead of you going on your walks, daily walk or whatever, and taking pictures, it would be,
yes,
I'm going to do a bit of sound recording.
Well, my habit is to go out and take photos for the Tundra Journal, that if anyone ever looks at it, is on my Facebook site, and is on the Braemar Gallery site sometimes as well. But these are my photographs I take when I'm out in the morning and evening, out with the dog, really. But you know, because you're out twice a day, invariably you see some amazing stuff. So I want to take it a bit further and do it with the sound as well. So that's what I'm
great.
That's what I'm into. And because I've been revisiting a couple of things that David Toop's book, Ocean of Sound, I'd been revisiting that, and Max Neuhaus, a piece that he made for Times Square, which was involved collecting sounds and things like that. So I've got really into all that again. So really fired up about all my old subject matter from art school.
Excellent.
Yeah, man.
Well, we spoke about kind of the pool of nostalgia, and there was a lot of amazing releases, or re-releases, and one of them, or three of them I should say, was the Marina trilogy from the Bathers. Lagoon Blues, Sunpowder, and Kelvin Grove Baby. And I also managed to do a podcast. One of my highlights of the year was doing a podcast with the Bathers singer and founder Chris Thompson, where he talked about these re-releases. For people that don't know, Marina Records is this incredible record label that in the 90s in particular just seemed to put out all these amazing Scottish bands. Pearl Fishers, James Kirk, who was in Orange Juice, Cowboy Mouth, which was Skinner from Hipsway. Oh God, far too many to kind of mention. Go Google Marina Records and you'll see Sugartown. You'll see what exactly the things that they did, and all the back catalogue is amazing. It's not just the Scottish stuff. But if ever a band was made to be done on vinyl, it would be the Bathers, I think, because very lush, and you can see that beautiful picture if you're looking on the Zoom version, kind of sepia picture, and their whole style was very visual. They had a very strong sense of style as well. And yeah, so they decided they were going to put these out on vinyl, and I think it's been a huge hit. I know they've had to order kind of repressings, and for people my age who were into them the first time round and maybe only had them on CD, and now, you know, we're all about the record players and the vinyl, we thought, yep, these are great, and they're great to own, great to listen to again, and they're remastered. They're not just kind of thrown out again. They've been worked on. And are sounding great. But, you know, like Last Night from Glasgow reissued the Bluebells and Sisters, which is a great record that I kind of missed the first time round, I have to admit. It was great to go and listen to that. And also they're going to be doing Trash Can Sinatras and a lot more. So I think this idea of, it's a nice, but you know, life is a balance. And I like to, you know, obviously the new stuff is really important to listen to and do it, but I think there's nothing wrong with kind of every now and again, you know, going back and enjoying your youthful days.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, Andy, your next one, which is Brown, which is up to date, I think.
Yeah, it's bang up to date because it just came out, and I think you were listening to this last night, Ali, weren't you?
A couple of nights ago, over the weekend, yeah.
Yeah, so I actually have to read the title because I don't know. I've just been listening to it and I didn't know what it was called. But it says "The Never Beyond" by Bud Ellen.
Yeah, it's a magical record.
Yeah, and it really is, because I like my Christmassy stuff, Ali. As you know,
yeah,
I like a mince pie, and I do like my Christmassy stuff. But this is the old Christmas songs. You know, they're really verging on, you know, sort of it's sort of pagan forebearers and all that kind of stuff, and it's also incredibly it's quite dark. And what have I written here? I wrote some notes here to say what I thought about it. Yeah, it's very sonically rich. You know, sometimes it will go off into this almost electronic sort of richness, and then these incredibly pure voices come out of it when they're singing, you know, some of my favorite Christmas, like the Coventry Carol, which is, there's none more dark, really, you know, when you're talking about what it's about, the content of the Coventry Carol, and blah blah blah. And the Cutty Wren, which I kind of knew from Robin Williamson's records, he has one out which is called The Winter's Turning, and that's on that. And Corpus Christi Carol as well. So lots of stuff that you might already know, but done in, it's a strange mix of incredibly traditional and electronic, which works really well. And I wasn't surprised to see that they'd worked with oh gosh, Alistair Roberts. Similar kind of vibe off it, you know, that kind of dark witchiness.
I think everything I've heard from Bud Ellen over the years, and they have released quite a bit, has been building up to this record. I think it's amazing. I'd listened to it, as you say, over the weekend, and just every time I heard it, there was something else going on. It's the perfect record for this kind of year. If you, like Andy and I, do like that kind of oldie worldy feel almost to Christmas, you know, it's not the new stuff, it's the dark and eerie, and I mean, you know, Box of Delights, if you like, kind of
with a hey nonny nonny and a foldy roll roll.
Yeah, exactly. That's that sort of thing. And this album, it was absolutely perfect for it. Can you tell us the name of it again, Andy, so that people know?
Yes, I can. The album. Oh, crikey, I'm trying to open my beer. You caught me off guard. Says The Never Beyond, it's called. And there's a picture of it again.
Absolutely.
There you go. It's a fantastic album, and I'll probably listen to that tonight because I'm in the mood. But yeah, no, great album. And I've been collecting.
Bud Ellen are Debbie Armour and Gail Brogan.
I didn't say that. Sorry, no, I admitted that. But for years I've been sort of amassing these kind of recordings. You know, looking at old chants and plain song, and going right back. And so I have this catalogue of this, but this seems to be like they've just hit the nail on the head of what I like, this sort of mixture of oddness and traditional ancient type stuff.
Okay, Andy, I think, is it me? It is me. So again, over the last few years, if you've been following Scots Way's podcast, you'll know I've done quite a few with Scottish opera. And I really get into the opera. I've been reviewing it, and I knew nothing about it to begin with, really. And just kind of fell in love with it, the whole thing. And so the big one this year before everything changed was Nixon in China. And it was, as it says, oh, Andy's on the Raven, bourbon milk stout. We'll have a review of that after I've finished talking about this.
Okay.
So Nixon in China, which was all about Richard Nixon's visit to China. And you think, well, how's that going to make an opera? But wow, it showed exactly what Scottish opera does at its very best. It does these big, spectacular productions that are just sensational, and every aspect of them. We've spoken to a lot of people who work across the different areas in Scottish opera, behind the scenes, if you like. Every aspect comes together, whether it's the staging, the costume, the orchestra, the singing, of course, and the acting as well. People forget that, you know, these are plays as well as just pure singing. It was a stunning piece of work. I don't know if you can get it online. If you can, go and check it out. But it was Scottish Opera's production of Nixon in China. And if that was the one they were going to leave us with, wanting more, then they've certainly done that. It was superb. Okay, Andy, I think the next one from you.
Yeah, well, you've gone from quite a high culture to, I was so excited. This is a book that I've wanted, many people have wanted reissued. It sort of was in libraries from the early 80s right through to probably mid 90s. Then it seemed to disappear. And it is, you can just see by the cover, it is Ghosts, the Usborne World of the Unknown, all about ghosts.
Now, I remember that from the library when we were kids.
Yeah, absolutely, Ali. So I knew this book inside it. You know, it's like I knew how it smelled almost, because I just spent so much time with this book. And to see it again, it just brought such a smile to my face to have it. I mean, it's not the hardback, it's a little bendy thing, and it has a new forward by Rhys Shearsmith, which you know, you can see, he like me spent his young days reading these kind of things. But I think we were talking earlier, not on this podcast, but off the podcast, that the libraries seem to have a horror section for children. I don't think they have that anymore. But there was some horrendous, scary, that gave me the Fantods for a long time. So I know that one inside out, but alongside that one, then they reissued this one.
Oh man! Oh man! Wow!
Yeah. So I got this
one. The know-how
too.
book of spycraft, lots of secret codes, tricks, and disguises.
Yes, yeah. And I used to do all these. You know, I would write little messages and screw them up into little bits of paper and put them in walls. And God knows if anyone found them, Ali. But so the Usborne, the know-how book of, it's so delightful to see these books out again. And I bought them for my wee boy, but I'll keep them safe.
Yeah, mint condition.
Yeah, mint condition.
I think it's interesting going back to the in the 70s in particular. I would say in particular, maybe going into the 80s, people weren't afraid to scare kids, like properly scare kids. You know, almost like mini horror movies and dramas that were, you know, not just adverts telling you to stay away from pylons and, you know, don't talk to strangers and all that kind of stuff. So Andy's now holding up the book Discovering Scarfolk.
Yeah, well, that leads me on to this, and I'm just going to quickly talk about this. I just brought it just in case, but these have been sort of diluted into these books. There's a website called Scarfolk, and they've produced 2 books, and it's very much of that ilk, sort of hauntology, the scarier side of the 70s and early 80s that we all grew up with. They're quite fun. They brought out that one and that one. Scarfolk, and they're really worth tracking down if you're into that kind of thing. Sorry, Ali, continue.
No, that is good. Before we go into our next one, I've now switched beers to the Siren Calypso, which is very sour, but much nicer. I guess what we found out tonight is I much prefer sour to sweet when it comes to my beers.
Is it totally tropical?
It's a big fruit punch, but I like it.
Well, my Raven Bourbon Milk Stout by S43 Brewery.
It sounds
Right.
nice. That sounds right up my street, I have to say.
Mm.
So next, I'd like to talk about a
That makes really good listening, doesn't it? Two people discussing their beverages.
You know, we're flagging up the beers.
Absolutely.
A wee Christmas drop. So
Yeah.
I want to talk about a podcast, and it was my podcast of the year, and it was a Sonic Hug from Helena Rifai, which was on the Big Light podcast network. And basically, these are mental health stories. She speaks to performers, musicians, writers, and other people who give very honest, very brave to do it, I think, stories about their relationship with their mental health and the problems they may have had and how they're kind of trying to come to terms with it. And I think, as you and I both know, it's really important not just to talk about these things, but also to listen to other people and have shared experience and think, oh God, that's not just me. That's other people are going through something similar. And suddenly that can help have a kind of weight off your shoulders. And that's what these do. And Helena just lets them talk. It's, you know, which might sound obvious, but it's not. You know, often people want to have themselves in their podcasts, and I might be guilty of that too. But actually just tell your story the way you want to tell it. And I mean, they're incredibly moving, but they're really strengthening, I think, not just for the people who are talking about them, but for me as a listener as well. They are incredible. It's called a Sonic Hug. A Sonic Hug. And if you Google it, I don't think you'll regret it.
Also, the podcast format's probably perfect for that kind of thing, because it's, you know, it's such an intimate sort of, it's you and the listener, isn't it? You know, it's not like a broadcast as such. You know, you feel you're the only person listening to the thing. It's like a friend talking to you, sort of thing.
Well, exactly. And you're not getting, you know, the news coming in or the weather coming in or someone thinking, oh, can you wrap up? It's really why it's the perfect example about why I wanted to start doing podcasts, was to let people tell their stories over the length of time it takes for them to tell it as they want. And that's what these are so good at. Highly, highly recommend a Sonic Hug podcast, which Helena Rifai, who you might know better from Glasgow Podcast, has put together this year. And I think there's going to be more to come in the new year too.
A similar podcast I found, Ali, just as a note, was the Griefcast. I can't remember who does it, but there's one called Griefcast, and it's people talking, you know, about times of grief, and it's actually fantastically useful to know that you what you're feeling is not a lot. You know, when the poo-poo hits the fan, that you know, there are people going through it, and it's best to find out about these things.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the great things, as you say about podcasting, you can find podcasts about everything, you know, like stone clearing or something like that. But you can get into things that, you know, as you say, it's that shared experience, whereas previously you maybe thought, oh, this is just happening to me and only me. And I think now we're beginning to see that that's, you know, experiences are they're always shared with someone. Okay, it's your 9th. I think we're on to number 9, Andy.
I'm nearly there, yeah. I'm nearly there. Right, so I rediscovered one of my art heroes again, looking back at my sort of student years. I found this book, which was like my Bible at the time. It's called Tom Phillips' Works and Texts, and it's by Thames and Hudson. And I think you can still get it. And it's just all of Tom Phillips's projects, and he's actually written up the projects himself. And honestly, I just never come across this approach before, and he just became my tutor almost, you know, in that format. I mean, obviously I had very good tutors at Gray's School of Art, right, guys? But that was that just taught me so much.
There's a little bit of a pressing.
So Tom Phillips is what I knew. How I got to get to Tom Phillips was he taught Brian Eno when Brian Eno was at art school. So that's the connection. So plus he's made records, and it was all that I think it was Camberwell. It was all that process-based art that came out of the 60s. and where the making of the art was the art. You know, the product perhaps wasn't as important as the making of the art, the actual process. So some of these works are highly layered with their intellectual rigor. I want to say that, Ali.
Yeah.
But you know, there's layers and layers and layers of meaning in these things. But also some fun ones. One of the projects is 20 sites in 20 years, which I've kind of taken into my own work. You know, is he takes the same 20 photos and the same 20 sites, and it's actually now over 40. His son's taken over, but and it makes an amazing read. That there's lots. The other thing that he was obsessed with was postcards, and that's led me on to being obsessed with about 10 postcards, which I bought in about 2001 in Oxfam shop, and there are and the idea is that you can make your art's all contained in there if you want it to be. You know, you can make your paintings about these scenarios that are being acted out in these postcards, you know, or whatever.
Cards of our childhood, if you like. Is that right?
Yeah, well, also setting up rules, you know, say find a postcard for 10p in a local charity shop, you know, and you set yourself a set of rules, a process to make something. So you need never be stuck to make anything. You wait for that inspiration, that flash of lightning. You don't need to, because you can have rules and say, buy the first, like for this one, he said, buy the first book for 10 a guinea or whatever it was at the time. And it was a Victorian novel called, what was it called now? A treated Victorian novel, The Humament. Well, his version is The Human Mount. It's actually called The Human Document. But what he does is he's taken an existing book and mined it for new stories.
Right.
And so he's picked out new stories out of the pages of the existing book, and he's now done it about 5 times out of the same book and have 5 different stories with all the artwork, you know. So incredibly productive way of working. So Tom Phillips, words and text. I've been going back to that.
Yeah.
Sorry if I went on a bit, but that's
that sounds good, and a really interesting way of a practical way of kickstarting your kind of art, whatever it might be.
Well, you can see how Brian, you know, got the ideas of setting systems in place and, you know, setting out the seeds for ideas and then letting it weave its own thing. The artwork almost creates itself. You just have to follow the rules, you know. Fascinating. Anyway.
Right, well, I would like to talk about, this has been an amazing year for Scottish writing and Scottish literature, and we've done 2 best of books podcasts, which you can still catch up with friend Vicky Riley. And the reason it's 2, because there was just so much to talk about. We ended up over 2 separate hour-long podcasts. But maybe the highlight of the year in terms of profile was Shuggie Bain, Douglas Stewart's Shuggie Bain winning the Booker Prize. I actually met someone today who said they were at Waterstones in Silverburn, and everybody in the queue had a copy of Shuggie Bain under their arm, and there was posters up saying get it there. So this will be making a huge difference, and because it's a very, very good book. I read it a while ago now, and I have to say I had some issues with it, but the longer I've gone on thinking about it, the more I think, no, I was wrong. This is a really good book, and there's also, and I'll do a review of it. People can, you know, find out why that is. But in terms of profile of a nation's literature worldwide, to get the Booker Prize win does no harm at all. It really does kind of send other writers, then people will, it's a bit like when a Scottish band hits big and then suddenly all the A&R people, you know, go in the town that they're from and think, well, we're looking for the next Orange Juice, or we're looking for the next Aztec Camera or something like that. So there are a bit of that. So there was loads of great books come out this year. Andrew Hagen's Mayflies, I think you, Andy, would really enjoy, I have to say, even though it would make you greet. And you had Graham Armstrong's The Young Team that came out, and Peter Ross's book about going around cemeteries, which was his non-fiction book, which is a great book. And Scabby Queen, Kirsten Innes's, but there was far too many to mention here. Go to our Best Books podcast and you'll hear us talking about much more of them. But yeah, I couldn't not talk about Douglas Stewart's Booker Prize win with Shuggie Bain. Okay, Andy, it's your final choice, I believe.
My number 10 is this that came out just at the end of last year.
Is
And
it an album?
it is, Ali. I was going to talk about the book. There's a new book called Inside the Box of Delight, I think it's called, but it's not arrived yet. So I got this, and this is fans of this, the Box of Delights, BBC's version, as it's Christmas. Fans of this were waiting for this music for 30 years. And saying, why isn't there a record of this? You know, you can get the bit at the start, which is a classical rendition of, it's the Carol Symphony. But they didn't have the incidental, which is amazing music because it's that weird, like we were talking about, the weird sort of mid 80s, early 80s. Oh, we can afford an oboe player and we can afford a harp player, but we're going to do the rest with synths and radiophonics. So that, and this, they just put it together so nicely. The actual packaging, the whole thing. Is it one record? Yes, it's two records. It's two records, and it's just a really nicely put together thing. And I got it on CD as well, just in case. But I don't play CDs anymore, really.
For those who are not aware, and there will be some, what is the Box of Delights? We have tried to watch it at least every Christmas since it kind of came out, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Well, would it come out 84, 85, something like that. And before that, there was a radio play which a lot of people loved. In fact, the guy that plays Abner Brown in the BBC one, he used to listen to it as a boy. He said he insisted that music was the same at the start. You know. Yeah, it's a novel, a children's novel about Kay Harker and his Christmas holidays. And is it a dream or isn't it? Or is it? But his adventures on his Christmas holidays, and he meets a gang of lubbers and pirates, and they get up to no good. And then he meets the Punch and Judy man who has a magical box and gives it to Kay to keep for him in case the baddies get it. And
spoilers.
Oh, shitting hell! Yes, of course. Sorry, guys, but it's fab. It's one of my favorite things, and it's one of my pleasures at this time of year to watch that. And
a bit like the Bird Ellen album that we spoke about, it's got that mix of Christmas as a Christian festival, I suppose, but also something weirder and older and more.
That's right.
Going on as well, and the two kind of clash and don't quite fit together. I think is which is lovely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's one of my favorites, and it's just so nice to have the music in one place.
Music is amazing. It's an amazing thing. Okay, well, my final choice is well, it's two. I'm going to reference two of my heroes. One was at the very end of last year on the 29th of December. Unfortunately, Alistair Gray passed away. Alistair, who I was lucky enough to do some work with and edit his book Off Me and Others, or co-edit it. Or really, I did not edit it. It was all Alistair that was doing it. But yeah, it was very sad, the passing of a truly great man, an absolute genius, and a figure central to Scottish arts, not just Scottish writing or painting, but Scottish arts in general. So I just wanted to note that. And next year will be the 40th anniversary of the publication of Lanark, his great debut novel that took him a long time to write and get out there. And there'll be a lot of things celebrating that, including some podcasts. So listen out for those. But yeah, that was it was a very sad way to start what became, you know, an even crazier year. But yeah, I couldn't not note the passing of the great Alistair Gray. And last year also was the centenary anniversary of Edwin Morgan, Alistair's great pal and one of the great poets, the first ever Scottish macker. And there were lots of celebrations. Unfortunately, a lot of them had to be cut short because there was going to be lots of live events and conferences at unis and things like that. But it all kind of went online. the Edwin Morgan 100. If you Google that, you'll be able to catch up with a whole load of things. Polygon released this lovely little box set of themed his poems, Space and Spaces, Take Heart, Menagerie, Scotland, and Love, and they've all got different introductions in them, and it's not expensive at all. It's well worth getting. It comes in a nice little box set, and it's 20 Edwin Morgans. It's just a lovely selection of stuff on Polygon. So yeah, just wanted to celebrate two great Scottish literary figures and Scottish cultural figures at the end there. I think that's us, Andy, unless there's something else you want to talk about.
No, not really, Ali. That's me. I've got my, I've left it all out on the ice.
Excellent. That's what we like to hear. Well, listen, all the best for Christmas when it comes round, and thanks for doing these, not just today, but earlier in the year.
Yeah. And it's a shame we won't be together, but that's it's going to be the first. Well, yeah, one of the first ones we aren't together, but we shall be.
You shall be doing a podcast on Christmas morning, just as an excuse.
Absolutely. Oh, can you imagine how insane that would be, a live feed?
Yeah, exactly. Oh dear, for all sorts of reasons. No, I'll be in touch, and Merry Christmas to everyone and a Happy New Year that's listening.
Absolutely.
And we'll be back in the new year with someone completely different. Cheers.